So if you guys do hear, I apologize. Yeah. If you guys hear the 4-year-old trying to kill the 6-year-old in the background, then it's perfectly normal. So we'll just continue moving forward.
Awesome. I know a lot of my conference calls have little children running around in the background, and I know that's probably the case for many of you. So awesome. So Jacob, what can you tell us about your transition to working from home?
Absolutely. You know, a lot of my team and what we do is remote anyway. So coming back to this is kind of, we're not really removing much from what we were trying to do already, but we are seeing, you know, how do we do this correctly and how do we make this work? Obviously, Autodesk has a pretty good size right now to say this was what you guys need to do. So I'm interested to see the conversation on BIM 360 now. Am I freezing up on you guys?
Well, that's awesome. I know a lot of us have many offices, right? We work nationally. A lot of us are sharing projects across offices. So many of us have probably worked with BIM 360 before. I know we have a poll we can throw out there in terms of when we started working with BIM 360. Nick, hopefully you can throw that up for me. There we go. So when did you guys start using BIM 360? So was it during the transition, after the transition? Are you still not using BIM 360? That's an option there as well. So take a minute to answer that. Awesome. Yeah, I know that a lot of us have, it's been an easy transition, it's been a hard transition. So let's go ahead and see the results there in that poll, get an idea of how everybody on this call is working with BIM 360, if they have in the past, or maybe they're still not. Awesome. Okay, so it looks like quite a bit of us, almost about, I guess about a third, 2/3 rather, have worked with BIM 360 in the past. And look at that, a good percent, about a fifth, 20%, 20% of us are not using BIM 360 at all. So that's incredibly interesting to me. So let's run another poll here about how you guys have felt about your transition to BIM 360, or has this transition been easy, would you say? Once again, we want this to be a conversation. We want to get an idea from you, the audience, as to how this is running in your office and with your experience, right? So there we go. So are you well on your way? Like Jacob said, maybe you're already kind of working that way. So maybe it was very, very easy. It was already up in place, or WTF, right? Oh my goodness. Yeah. We're still trying to figure this out. So let's get an idea from you guys, the audience. All right, let's go ahead and share those results, Nick, get an idea. Awesome. Awesome. So it looks like many of us, Jacob, like you, have the same experience where they probably had a pretty good setup already, right? BIM 360 and some other tools to be able to remotely work and get into their company data. So how can you tell us a little bit else in terms of how McVeigh and Mangum has transitioned? What's changed?
So the one thing that I've actually kind of realized and thought about, and hopefully, you know, Autodesk might be able to go look into this a little bit more, but everybody is consistently working on a project server, right? Everybody has their storage drives and, you know, their projects drive, whether you did a P drive or an X drive, and then everybody has their Revit files there. So that's the typical situation for most people. And BIM 360 kind of takes your Revit files and moves them away, but really what happens to all that other information? What we've seen a lot now is, all right, so where does the information live? How did this transition work? I think, you know, are you using BIM 360 from your local machine and then having the VPN to access other stuff? Or are you, you know, having a VPN to a desktop that is running Revit that is accessing BIM 360 and the other video or the other data that's on your server? So what I'm hoping to see soon is something that will almost be a sync between a BIM 360 drive and a local drive, and not just the desktop connector, because everybody knows, if you don't know, always update your desktop connector, because if yours is out of date, you're going to start losing some information or break
I don't
something.
know about you. I get updates in the corner of my screen so often, way more often than I want to get. Right? Are you seeing that too, where desktop connectors just always having updates?
So there was one, this last one is really interesting, because if right now I had one of my associates end up getting an update, I would even go click on the desktop connector and say, check for updates, and it wouldn't show me a new one. So I would have to go download it from the website, but it literally was not allowing us to see all the same files. So it's really interesting. You know, almost it's like, hey, why don't you just make it a push and everybody gets the update all the time? It's what you guys need. But you know, that's become key, but it doesn't recognize all project or all file types. You know, it doesn't like zip files or IFC files really. So it's a matter of what are we doing with the other stuff that we have per project basis that we really need. Not to mention that
so
others on the call, you guys can, you know, jump in and let me know.
Circumstance. We've tried to move everything up to the cloud, right? So Excel files, PDFs, anything that the team needs to access, we tried to cut them having to get to the company server. So that's another thing that we want to ask you guys. How are you getting to your company data? Is it, you know, you're having to access the actual company server? Or like I said, is it all on the cloud? Maybe you have a VPN situation, you have a VDI, or maybe you have something else completely. We definitely want to hear from you. So go ahead, we'll take one more second to answer that, show you the results. There we go. So as you probably were expecting, a lot of people are using VPN, whether that's you know, VPN and then remote desktop or whatever it might be, to be able to get into their company data and maybe even access a pooled machine of sorts, right? So yeah, absolutely, Jacob, as you were saying, we've definitely tried to cut that back, but it really is a hassle, as you were mentioning, when we do have those limitations. And of course, it comes with a big training curve, right? Big learning curve, because completely different than what our users are used to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have a different access point to Revit files. There's a different situation of how to open them and where it stores them. But you know, seeing that a lot of people are still on VPN connections, I'm sure not everybody's office was set up with a full throughput for multiple people to be, you know, VPN into the office, access data outside of the office, and then push it back to their local machine. So it's, I'm sure a lot of people are seeing strain from, you know, the amount of information that they're pushing through. And Dan Warren has a very good acronym for it there.
Well, and I know that it causes degradation in your connectivity, right? So even when you're trying to download things from the cloud, sync, things like that, I know that BIMxt has put out kind of a PSA that, you know, being on VPN degrades their service. So definitely causes a lot of issues outside of the fact that we're not really ready for every single employee to be
Yeah.
on VPN, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And really it depends on your settings, but a lot of VPNs actually start to pull the actual throughput from your office and not your local internet. So if you have gig internet at home, a lot of VPNs will actually push you to the, 50 megs that your office is running and you're stuck on that, which if anybody's ever had to deal with that, that is the biggest pain in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. So any other challenges that you guys have come up with in terms of working from home and the transition?
It was the matter of, who has a strong enough computer that possibly could do it at home versus a lot of the engineering side of my company was set up with desktops. So as you saw, a lot of people had VPN or trying to do a virtual desktop interface. Well, most of my company set up to do RDP. So that was, interesting because even if the project was on BIM 360, you are now VPN into a remote desktop to then access BIM 360. And just thinking about that, it's so backwards, right? The whole point was to be able to do it outside of the network and do it. But I will say that I hope everybody starts realizing if you're on BIM 360 and seeing it, the advantages are, you can actually be in a hotel, 5 meg internet speed, and be logging into BIM 360 using Revit, pushing it back, and not be affecting all your employees that might be back in the office. Especially if anybody used the Revit server back in the day, of how that would hang up and tell everybody to hold on while you sync for 45 minutes.
Right, which of course, if we do still have those users that aren't used to working from home, so they just get on VPN and access the model right from their computer, right? And then
Yep.
everybody experiences a freeze when they sync to Central, right? It's a great troubleshooting thing that I'm sure all of us BIM technicians and BIM folk have had to deal with for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anybody out there that has had a unique problem that they've ran into? Go ahead and speak up, because obviously this is something that we've all
We'd
experienced
definitely
something in the
love to
past
hear
2 months.
in the chat. And with that being said, I know that a lot of us have used BIM 360 in the past, but I would assume that's probably leveraging, like Jacob was saying, local content, maybe even some local Revit projects where they're not being shared across offices and different things like that. So we want to hear from you guys. Do you plan on using BIM 360 after we get back to the office, whatever that looks like, right? Whenever that happens. So we do have a poll on that. Go ahead and throw that up. See what you guys anticipate in terms of your future and BIM 360. And just in terms of file content as well, where we've started to store our content, is it on our company servers? Is it, on the cloud, etc. And that will be our next question there. So we'll wrap up this question, show the answers there. So just kind of as I expected, we'll probably go back to basically the way that we worked before, right? Where we will be utilizing BIM 360, but we'll also leverage the local content as well. So like I know at Smith Group, if we had a project that was very small, just in DC, really fast paced, maybe we don't need to throw it up on BIM 360. Maybe it can be just saved on our local server. So looks like half of us thought on that, but 25% actually will go all to the cloud. So that's really wonderful. So the next question we want to ask you guys is, outside of your Revit models, where do you store and share your your non-Revit content? So whether that's with consultants, whether that's internally, how are you guys leveraging sharing your files? Do you use Dropbox still? Is it all up on the cloud? Excuse me.
It looks like a few people have chimed in there with Newforma, which, Newforma is a good option. It's got that whole tracking system that you can actually make sure everything goes in the right place at the right time. For us, we actually have bit the dust and migrated a lot of it to Microsoft. The Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, trying to push all that together where we're actually seeing that. Of course, we still have, for some reason, an FTP site. We still have our, Dropbox here and box files there. But other than that, it's basically we're trying to do as much as we can between Microsoft Teams and SharePoint, which is another integration I hope Autodesk finally bites and puts together with them, is to be able to sync those folders back and forth.
So let's go ahead and see from you guys how, I know some of us have shared within the chat, which is fantastic. Keep posting in there. We definitely want to hear from you guys, how you're sharing data. And you can actually put in here multiple choices to check all that apply. I noticed that in the chat, a lot of us are using OneDrive. I love OneDrive. I think OneDrive is fantastic. I know that we do get into problems with linking to OneDrive in Revit and different things like that. Maybe 2021 will be different. If anybody has some comments on that, I'd love to hear about that for those of you who are using OneDrive. Microsoft Teams, huge fan of Microsoft Teams. I think it's a huge benefit, especially when we're working from home or even collaborating across multiple offices, across multiple teams and disciplines. Really wonderful place for us to be able to share ideas, ask questions, what have you. And of course, the good old tried and true Google Drive. I'm a huge Google user. If I owned my own company, especially if it were smaller, I'd probably go all Google. That's just me. So let's go ahead and get the results there, see where we're looking at here. Once again, this was multiple choice, so. All right, so a lot of us are using BIM 360 completely. Looks like a quarter of us. That's awesome, and definitely where we're trying to go at Smith Group, trying to leverage all of our content that we can be up there, up on BIM 360. Lots of OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint, and other. In the comments, we'd love to see what some of the others are. You guys want to share up there, if you don't mind? Love to hear that.
And for the people that's all on BIM 360, or even some of the other platforms, one of the biggest things is you got to have a standard way of mapping all the information. BIM 360 automatically puts it all under your username and your app data. So if somebody opens a file that is XREFed or linked from Revit, you don't have the same path as the other groups. So you have to pay attention to that, because you could basically make everybody redo the process every single time. There are little tricks to fix BIM 360 and point it to, say, a second drive or a D drive that everybody can have the same path, but there's a lot of, continued maintenance with that too.
Well, thank you so much, Jacob, for your input and some of the issues and successes that you guys have had at your company down there in North Carolina. We really appreciate it. Next
thank
up
you very much,
today,
Dana.
absolutely. Next up, we have Roy Malcolm. He comes to us today from Richmond, Virginia at DPR Construction. Hey, Roy, how's it going?
Doing great, Dana. How about yourself?
Doing well, thank you. Beautiful day here in DC. I assume it's similar in Richmond.
A little cooler than it has been, but that's not unwelcome.
Yes, absolutely. I'm right there with you. So, Roy, how have you been spending your time the last few months in isolation?
Yeah, so kind of the work bucket and the personal bucket. You know, the work, it's been just keeping up with all this craziness, right? You know, a lot of changes to the construction industry, new challenges, right? So trying to manage that and support our teams there. So a lot of huge efforts around that piece of it, but personal side, trying to stay healthy as much as possible. Fortunately, I've got a bigger yard I can go walk around in, and trying to do some gardening and spend some time outside and not huddled around my desk all day.
Absolutely. And once again, wonderful weather, as long as it stays above freezing, right?
Right, exactly.
And the squirrels have been getting to all my plants. I don't know about you.
A few of those, yeah.
So, BIM 360, how's DPR been? And you guys have been handling your transition?
Yes, I think we were pretty well prepared, kind of like Jacob, for handling this situation. I mean, a lot of our projects, we have team members located all over the place, right? I mean, one project I'm working on now, it's in Richmond, design teams from Texas. We have other design team members in Boston, DC, some trade partners from Utah. So everybody's all over the place working remotely to begin with, right? So from a VDC standpoint, we were kind of already there. I mean, everybody's all about virtual meetings now, but we've been designing and constructing virtually for years. So from that standpoint, we were pretty well equipped to be able to handle this situation anyhow. We had the tools in place, the processes in place. And fortunately, too, we weren't burdened from a DPR standpoint by any VPNs or VDI or anything like that. We've gone completely to the cloud, fortunately. The only thing we have to use a VPN for is to access license for some Autodesk software, some other software types. But it's been overall a pretty smooth transition, I would say. So we were fortunate in that sense.
Awesome. Any complications or maybe, hang-ups that you guys have had as you have all kind of gone to the home workplace, as most of us have?
Sure. Yeah, certainly challenges. I think the biggest one, at least for me anyhow, was just a bandwidth standpoint. You know, I live out in the woods and only have DSL, so downloading a Revit model is just out of the question unless I have a week time to spare. But we've had some challenges with that, folks around Richmond anyways. But we've been able to get past that, and BIM 360's helped out a lot. We've actually been able to get more people access to the models, to constructability type reviews, because there's been certain folks that they're not on site, they don't have access to their normal work activities, so they do have a little bit more capacity. So we've taken advantage of that and used tools like BIM 360 Docs and the model viewers and BIM 360 Glue through Navisworks to just get people in there and say, hey, we know you're not out in the field, so can you spend some time just walking through the model, or we'll walk you through it for that matter, and just help us to identify some potential problems, and then we can collaborate a little bit more and be a little more proactive on that piece. But a challenge then has been for folks trying to get Navisworks working remotely with them to download and install that software, and getting through home networks and all of that has been somewhat of a challenge. And from a training standpoint as well, obviously you can't just hand somebody a tool and expect them to know what to do with it. So we've had training programs in place and been transitioning those to virtual online trainings and figuring out ways that we can get more folks engaged and help them to use this time as when they're working from home to, again, be more proactive and more model-based.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think once again, utilizing Microsoft Teams is we found, and personally I found, a wonderful platform in order to share with many people across the office, right?
Absolutely.
Well, it looks like we have over 100 people on the call, which is fantastic. We love to hear that. So we'd love to see where all of you guys are here from today. So we have a poll coming up. You guys can answer that on where you are today. If you are in a different location, unfortunately, in the poll, you can't put in a input. So if you have a different place or a state or country that is not listed, we'd love to hear in the comments where you guys are calling in from today. So please take a minute to answer that, and then we'll share up the results, get an idea of where everybody is. Once again, Jacob is in North Carolina. I'm in Washington, D.C., and Roy is in Richmond, Virginia. So we're all pretty close, but in different states and obviously in the district. So, all righty, let's see where everybody is today. Once again, if you did other, we would love to see in the comments where you guys are.
Lima.
Oh, looks like we have someone from Peru. That's fantastic. About a quarter of us from Maryland. Only 6% from DC. Where's my district love? Good percent. Most of us from Virginia, 26%. 22 from North Carolina, and 9% from other states not listed. That's actually quite fantastic. And I'm guessing that outside of the U.S., that would be our Peru support. Go Peru. That's fantastic. All right. Sorry for that interruption, Roy. So other transitional pitfalls or obstacles that you guys have come up with? I know absolutely that training people, especially considering that everything is different now, right? It's like, hey, guess what? You have to open up your model in a completely different way. You have to go over here and you have to click on that, and then you have to come down here and you have to click there. And translating all of this information can be quite difficult, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, you mentioned Teams has and been helpful in that regard. So just being able to jump on a quick call with somebody, and it's a lot easier to bring up a model and just share your screen with somebody and kind of walk them through, hey, this is what we're looking at. Are you seeing the same thing? And it's interesting now to see everybody really taking to that. And I'm pretty excited once all of this is over and we're back in the office that hopefully this continues and people maintain this kind of reliance, or at least some of this enlightenment that, hey, I can use all of these tools and use the models for these other workflows, and they're now seeing the advantages of it. So, if there's one good thing that comes out of all of this, it's going to be pushing more folks towards a model-based workflow, which, looking at the bright side of things is going to be beneficial moving forward. I think just some other challenges too that we've had, we immediately got everybody on Teams, and that was the good part. But beyond just the technology standpoint, with construction too, and just some of the changes that are a part of that, right? Like we've had a kind of an increased pressure maybe to do a better job of planning ahead and then tracking versus that plan. So now having these tools and BDC and BIM again has been pushed to the forefront in a lot of folks' minds of a way that, hey, we've known that we can do a lot of these processes and use it to our advantage for a long time, but now it's kind of larger emphasis has been put on it, right? So from things like just using the model to schedule better and have some plans, like we're using Assemble now more than ever to sequence our work and to have a stronger plan in place. And from a virtual meeting now, we've got all of our folks from the guys that are still out in the field to our design teams, trade partners, and then DPR coming together around this assemble model, just looking at, like steel sequencing, for example, and all collaborating around this single platform, and then translating that back, kind of a cool workflow there from assemble to BIM 360 with everybody housing their models within the cloud, and then DPR, we can pull that information and extract it out, kind of do some sequencing and work packaging within assemble, and then pushing that out even more, and then kind of using Teams as the go-to between all of these different platforms. I think somebody mentioned in the chat, there's so many of them out there, not sure what's going on. And, Teams has now became this really the replacement for the office almost. So the conversations that you would walk over to somebody's desk and have that 5-minute chat is on Teams, which is cool.
Absolutely. Would you say that it's more of people contact you and you help them as needed, or are you publishing content on Teams, PDFs or images, any kind of documentation on there to kind of a step-by-step of how to do certain tasks?
Sure, absolutely. It's a little bit of both, when folks reach out, but we try to be a little more proactive, and we had a lot of that content. We're in the process of moving a lot of it from a more classroom-based type training to online self-paced training sessions. And so we escalated that and accelerated.
Is that in-house? You guys are doing that in-house? Or are you using Lynda or other platforms?
Mm-hmm. It's mostly in-house. We actually work with Microdesk a little bit on some external training.
Awesome. So we want to hear from you guys. How do you guys leverage training in-house? So we have a poll, hopefully it's ready here, on how you guys are learning while outside of the office, and whether that's getting content internally or getting content online, watching videos, whatever it might be. Definitely want to hear from you on that. Because I know that it's definitely, like we've been talking about, an extremely huge challenge. I know that, there's definitely firms lucky enough to be hiring at this point. And how do you onboard somebody that you can't see face to face, right? How are you giving them orientation and, bringing them up to speed on some of their internal processes? Where content lives, all of this good stuff, if you aren't with them. I know that Smith Group, we have an internal kind of, we call innovations resource that we upload content to. You can register for live classes or listen to the recorded sessions. And of course, in addition to that, we have documents and procedures outlined in different forms. Like you said, Roy, we're transitioning from different, having that on SharePoint to being on Teams and other resources that we can actually get to outside of being on VPN and other things. So I don't know about you guys, but there should be a poll, but I see Christopher Alexander really big on my screen, which is awesome. Hey, Christopher, I love your background. Hopefully that's the winner. I would choose that. Where's my stapler,
Pretty awesome.
Pretty awesome. All right. So let's see here. Now it's me, really big. All right. So looks like Christopher Alexander, you have a question on sharing models versus working models. Do you want to ask that question for us?
Yeah, it was really more of a point of, there seemed to be the poll that came out and everyone discussing afterwards. There's a difference between the shared model. So in my mind, I had interpreted that as externally sharing, giving to someone. So sending a snapshot model to someone, as opposed to having a centrally located work shared model so that we could work on it as one. because when we've done it, like we tried Dropbox and all those, and that's beyond horrific to try to do a work shared model, but it works generally pretty fine to do a shared, like to send a model. And so I think there was just a difference of wording that I wanted to clarify as far as a transmittal of a model or the sharing, work sharing of a model, because there seemed to be just people, I think, took it their own way and then responded relative to that. So I don't know if it was
Absolutely.
clear.
No, great catch. Absolutely. And that is a huge issue, right? Especially as Autodesk has transitioned from what they're calling teams, right? Or A360 to B360, and then we have docs, and then, all these different names, and it just changes all over the place. So we definitely don't mean to further confuse. I guess the question that I wanted to really look towards was actually outside of Revit. Even, if you wanted to send, or even internally, you wanted to get to a PDF, maybe your project team needs to be able to get to content regularly, write meeting minutes and project notes, project information, different contexts within the project, whatever it might be. Where are those things saved, right? Because as we've all noted, it's definitely a challenge to have everybody within the firm accessing things through VPN, or citrusing in, or remote desktop in, or whatever it might be, to be able to get to a server is definitely problematic, right?
Right. And yeah, I think somebody else pointed out, like, the language and the Autodesk is pretty horrific as far as their being pedantic, which it needs to be for something like this, as far as their language and terminology. Sent numerous problems to them saying, hey, this help thing came up when I searched it for BIM 360, but it's collaboration for Revit, and it's no longer applicable because the entire permission structure has changed, but you guys didn't change or rebrand or fix or pull it offline. It's not even available anymore. Why are you supporting it? Like, why can't it be hidden behind something else? So, and they didn't understand because apparently it makes sense to them. So, and David pointed out in the chat, there's BIM 360, BIM team, or whatever they called it, A360 team that was there, whatever, for a very short brief. And then there's Microsoft Teams, which is what I think we were all holistically mostly referring to when we were saying teams, but it's one more fun thing of just the terminology is encumbering for having conversations even like this, let alone actually trying to get work done.
Yeah, and I actually think you brought up even another point, or a great one to discuss about. And really, if anybody's out there that has started doing this, I would like to hear about your experiences too. But what about the work sharing on BIM 360 with all consultants, right? Stop pushing a model to the external groups. I know engineering size wise, my teams are, on the Architect's BIM 360 sites, and we are doing live work sharing. It's got to start going that way. I know there's a lot of headaches with it, and if you ask engineers, there's a lot of problems with engineers having seen stuff being moved. But is there anybody else out there that they're using this as a full collaboration, everybody together? Because I mean, obviously that's what the full goal is for what Autodesk is trying to do.
Absolutely. And I think in a perfect world, we would all even be live linking, right, to those files that are being published, and we have some automated tasks that are publishing those every night, and everybody's in that same sandbox playing nicely.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Get rid of the consumed folder.
Yeah. Which becomes even kind of leads me to the next step, is it's so complicated, right? It's so complicated because then you have to you have to publish it, and then you have to create a package, and then that package gets sent to the shared folder, which then kind of creates, I guess, what we would refer to as a dead link, right? That we can kind of control how often those updates get made. So it's definitely, even for us BIM gurus, right? It's even still a huge learning curve, because as we're trying to explain it to our teams and how they work with consultants and all of that, definitely makes it a challenge. So we do have another question here. Dan Warren from Charlotte, North Carolina. Hey, Dan, can you hear me?
Asked them if they got any shop drawings put together, if we could get those.
Dan Warren. Maybe he's a little busy talking about shop drawings.
No, that's not Dan.
That's not Dan.
We unmuted the wrong Dan.
Oh, unmuted the wrong Dan. Hey, Dan Warren, how's it going?
It's going great, thanks. Other than it is raining absolute cats and dogs here in Charlotte as we speak.
Goodness. Well, that could be good for your garden, I guess.
Yes. There's a lot of really good points that were brought up in the last, I would say, 2.5 minutes. And as somebody who has been on many sides of the reseller fence and on the actual production side of a project, I've been with the BIM 360 platform since its very early phases and watched it grow. And yes, we're going through a pretty magnificent evolution right now. But everything that everyone is talking about is harping to you need to have a strategic plan for your project. Like every single project needs to be addressed as a unique plan. And when I get my teams to do that, that's where we get a lot of success, because they think, oh, we just live link in the cloud and that's the end of it. Well, there's a lot more to consider than that, right? Like sometimes we have to partner with another architecture firm. Sometimes we're not the AOR. Sometimes we have sort of a forced relationship with a client. All of these things have major impacts on how you share data with your team. And data is not just the Revit models, it's all of your project data. It could be Excel sheets, it could be meeting minutes, it could be whatever you need it to be, right? And you need to have those processes in place, and you need to understand how each of your different platforms support those processes. So Teams, for example, if you want to use Teams to collaborate with an external partner, there's an IT setup and requirement for that. Like you need to have that in place. You can't just say, oh, we're going to connect to each other in Teams. Well, it's more than that, right? Get with your IT guy and talk to him about that. With BIM 360 and the desktop connector, we have found that if we keep everybody on our firm on the latest version, and yes, there's a bit of an overhead requirement there, it smooths out our coordination issues big time on BIM 360. And yes, we do still occasionally manually send files to consultants, especially very early on in the project environment. But I just think a huge part of everything, that all these pains that everyone's talking about, come down to you need to have a plan, and you really need to understand how the platform supports it, especially if you're going to go down the controlled work sharing path that everybody has strong opinions about. It has its function, but if you do not understand how it works, it just causes a nightmare with support and with training. And you got to decide up front as a team, are we going to use that or aren't we? And once you get on that horse, don't change it mid-race, right? So that's just kind of my soapbox, is you kind of have to have a plan for how you're going to do it. But as somebody our entire firm is completely BIM 360 based, and we love it. It's made our life really, really easy.
And not only just, are we live linking, are we dead linking? How is that? How often do we publish? Also just comes down to, who gets permissions to what folder? Who's the project admin? Who's adding members? There's a lot of these weird logistics that the team needs to know about, right? And it, especially because it's so new, even for us that are having to set up projects and set up the documentation on how all of it works, it's still a really big challenge, because we're having to figure out the clicks and the buttons before we even instructed ourselves. So, and I will say that website, if they create another button in a hidden place, right? It's like you have to click over here and then click down there and up here, and you know, every single corner is utilized within that website with little dots and waffles or whatever they want to call them, right?
And it also feels like a perpetual Easter egg hunt, because every time I go in to troubleshoot somebody's settings, I find some new thing that Autodesk has put in place. Like just recently, I mean, literally this morning, I found that BIM 360 now supports external file linking, so you can send files to members who aren't on BIM 360. Like that's huge for the BIM 360 platform, but I didn't see any announcement about that. So that one snuck by me until I was literally troubleshooting a project this morning. I was like, oh, look, I could do this now. That's one more document I have to write for my entire company.
Yeah, the new, go ahead, Roy.
Yeah, sorry, you got to subscribe to those weekly emails I send. That's the only way I found out about that one. And I think I jumped up and down and celebrated a bit when that one came out.
I was going to say that the new desktop connector has a sync feature now. And it's like they never called it sync before, and now all of a sudden we're
Right. Now, Dan, maybe you have some insight, and of course, Jacob, Roy. I've had some issues with users who are rendering or creating walkthroughs and how the material library is accessed. Have you guys noticed that? And I know we have a poll. Let's go ahead and throw up a poll. Where are you guys saving your materials? You guys have any insight on that? Why people are answering the poll?
So we personally, for our teams, we have found the easiest thing is to use our specific project library for each project, simply because it's one of those features that doesn't work well with the cloud right now.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of troubleshooting issues trying to put custom JPEGs and bitmaps on the cloud and things like that. And I think it has a lot to do with the way that specific feature is mapped. So there was a while there, you couldn't put a Keynote file on BIM 360. Well, now you can, because they changed the way that function maps in Revit. But I don't know if that was a change on the Revit side, the desktop connector side, or the BIM 360 side. But yeah, when we have our marketing models and our high res models, we generally kind of unfortunately have to default to the workflow where now we're doing that on where that information is stored on our P drive. And it can be frustrating. Now there are tools like Unify that smooth out that process a little bit. But for the most part, our teams end up just relying on the P drive because they know it's there.
And if you have an other location, please raise your hand in the comments or post in the comments. We'd love to hear from you guys where, even if you've had this issue, what's going on there. Because yeah, if we're saving them up, we're saving them on that same location on our company server, then once again, we're back to that same point where we're forcing everybody on VPN, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what we're trying to avoid. So definitely begins to be an issue. So thank you so much, everybody, for your questions. Thank you, Dan, Christopher. We'd love a few more questions. Looks like we're getting to the end of this. Roy, Jacob, do you guys have any last comments or tips? Anything that you guys want to wrap up with, feedback, anything like that?
No, I don't have anything. Just appreciate everybody and just save some time for some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the attendance we got. That's awesome.
We would also love to get suggestions on how we can improve this in the future. So please, I'd assume that there's going to be a survey, just like with our typical Revit user group. So if you signed up, expect a survey, but please share your comments with us. We'd love to get that. And lastly, it looks like we have a winner for the best virtual background. I hope I don't mispronounce your last name. It's Ryan Albach wins the best Zoom background for movement and architectural design flavor. So congratulations, Ryan. Can we get Ryan unmuted so that we can hear him and get his screen big and so that everybody can see it?
Thanks, guys. Yeah. This is a water feature in Copenhagen.
There we go. So most likely Jeff will be contacting you to give you your $25 Amazon gift card. So congratulations. Hopefully you can buy something fun and not toilet paper.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We will have another session next month. We typically will have these the third Wednesday of every month. But stay tuned for information on that. And once again, tomorrow there's a Your Desk University presentation. So thank you again for everybody for joining and all of your comments and feedback. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Jacob and Roy, for presenting today, and Christopher and Dan for your questions and coming in live today.
All right. Thank you, Dana.
Yeah,
Have
thanks,
a great day, everyone.